The first time I saw Rayan, he stood silently at the gate, a travel bag in one hand, a folded letter in the other. His posture was too calm for someone his age, too steady for someone who had just lost everything. At 17, he had already buried his last living relative, his grandmother, and accepted work in the home of a stranger nearly twice his age. Me. I had expected someone shy, awkward, maybe even resentful. Instead, Rayan walked in like he had been here before. He greeted me with a soft, respectful nod and said, "Thank you for taking me in, sir." There was no desperation in his voice, only gratitude, and something else I couldn't place. His eyes lingered longer than they should have. Not with rudeness, with knowing. I led him upstairs to the small guest room near my own. He didn't ask questions. He didn't flinch at the modesty of the space. He just smiled faintly and said, "It's perfect." Over the next few days, I watched him closely. He moved like water, quiet, adaptive, present without being intrusive. My house, always clean, became immaculate. My routines became his rhythms. Morning coffee was brewed before I woke up. My books were returned to their exact places without request. I had hired him to manage the household, but he was managing me in ways I didn't anticipate. At first, I told myself it was just coincidence, the way he anticipated my moods, how he offered tea when the headaches returned, or kept his distance when I stayed locked in the study for hours. But then came the moments that couldn't be explained so easily. A glance that lingered as I loosened my tie. A pause when our hands brushed over a dish. A question that felt more personal than polite. One night, I caught him standing at the balcony, staring at the city lights. "Do you ever get tired of being alone?" he asked without turning around. The question startled me, not because of its boldness, but because it echoed something I'd asked myself 100 times. I didn't answer. I simply stood beside him, both of us watching the city breathe in silence. There was nothing inappropriate in his words or behavior, nothing I could name or accuse. And yet I felt a shift, as though the house itself had changed, as though I had. Rayan was not just a boy needing shelter. He was becoming something else, something more complex, more intimate. And for the first time in years, I realized, was afraid. Not of him, of what he might awaken in me. As I closed my bedroom door that night, I heard him whisper behind it, too soft for certainty. "Good night, sir." A simple word, but somehow it felt like a question. Or maybe a promise. The days folded into each other with a quiet rhythm, marked by the sound of Rayan's footsteps and the clink of porcelain at breakfast. He never overstepped, never asked for more than what was offered. Yet something unspoken floated between us, thickening like mist. It wasn't tension, not quite. It was anticipation, like a door barely ajar, waiting to be pushed open. I began to notice things I hadn't before. The way he hummed softly while setting the table, the careful way he folded my clothes, as if each fabric held meaning. His gaze, when it met mine, was steady. Too steady. As though he was searching for something inside me, something I'd buried long ago. I tried to pull away. Told myself he was a child, though 17 was nearly a man. Told myself it was just misplaced. Gratitude, an orphan clinging to whatever kindness he could find. But the truth gnawed at the edges of that excuse. He wasn't clinging. He was choosing. Choosing me. One evening, the rain returned, painting the windows in silver streaks. The storm outside felt like an echo of the one inside me. I sat in my study, pretending to read, when I heard a soft knock. Rayan stepped in, barefoot, his hair damp, his eyes darker than usual. "I didn't mean to disturb you," he said quietly, standing just inside the doorway. "But I need to ask you something, and I need you to promise you won't be angry. I closed the book, my pulse unreasonably loud in my ears. Go on. He hesitated, not with fear, but with weight. Then, in a single breath, he said, "Can you love me? Even just once? Not as a servant, not as a boy, as someone who sees you and wants nothing from you but that." The room froze. For a heartbeat, the thunder outside stopped mattering. The question struck with precision, exposing a crack I hadn't dared acknowledge. I looked at him, not as a servant, not as a boy, but as someone who had been living in the same house, breathing the same air, understanding my silence better than anyone ever had. But still, it was wrong. Or at least, it should have been. I stood, trying to find words that wouldn't betray me. "Rayan, you don't know what you're asking." "Yes, I do," he said, stepping closer. "I've known since the first time you looked at me like you recognized something in me. Like I reminded you of a part of yourself you forgot." I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. And in that moment of paralysis, something inside me shifted. He didn't wait for an answer. He simply turned and left, closing the door behind him with the gentleness of someone who understood rejection might come, but asked anyway, because love deserved the chance. I stood in the silence he left behind, trembling with the weight of what he'd asked, and even more with what I hadn't said. I avoided him for 3 days, not out of cruelty, but fear. I buried myself in meaningless work, paced hallways that suddenly felt too narrow, and spoke only when necessary. Rayan, to his credit, or perhaps out of pain, said nothing. He returned to silence, performing his duties without a trace of the boy who had once dared to ask me for love. But silence can be louder than words. It pressed against the walls, filled the spaces between footsteps, and lingered in every dish set gently on the table. I began to miss his voice, his questions, his uninvited but welcome presence. Still, I couldn't approach him. Not yet. What disturbed me wasn't his request. It was how deeply I had considered it. How quickly my heart had leapt to answer, even as my mind screamed restraint. He was young, yes, but not naive. He saw me with a clarity that no one ever had, and for the first time in years someone had asked to love me. Not for wealth, not for comfort, but for the broken man behind the composed exterior. On the 4th evening, I found him in the kitchen, wiping down the counter with slow, distracted movements. The air between us crackled. I cleared my throat and he looked up, startled, like he hadn't expected me to speak again. "We need to talk," I said. He nodded, drying his hands. "I understand if you want me to leave." "That's not it," I said quickly, and his shoulders eased, though his expression remained unreadable. I hesitated, then asked, "Why me, Rayan? You don't really know me." "I do," he said softly. "You're kind in ways you don't show. You're lonely in ways you don't admit. And you look at me like I'm more than a shadow in your home. That's enough for me." I leaned against the door frame, suddenly tired. I've been hurt before, deeply. Loving someone ruined me once. I never recovered. Rayan stepped forward, cautiously, like approaching a wounded animal. "I'm not here to ruin you. I'm here because you deserve to be seen. Even just once." His words disarmed me, and before I could stop myself, I reached out, just a touch to his hand. He didn't flinch. He just held it, warm and steady. That night, we sat on the floor by the fireplace. No kisses, no confessions, just two souls unraveling in the quiet, sharing memories and silences like secrets. And in those hours, I allowed myself to forget boundaries, fear, and the ticking of the clock. But when morning came, the house was silent again, emptier than before. His room was bare. No note, No goodbye, just absence. And in that void, I realized, the boy who asked for love had given it freely, and I, paralyzed by doubt, had waited too long to receive it. The days that followed stretched like winter shadows, long, cold, and without promise. The house, once warm with quiet rituals and shared silences, now felt abandoned. Rayyan's absence was not loud, but it was everywhere. His mug still sat by the sink, a sweater lay forgotten on the back of a chair, and the soft indentation on the guest bed refused to rise. I kept imagining the moment he left, how he must have stood at the door, hesitating, perhaps waiting for a sign I would come after him. But I hadn't. My fear had chained me to inaction, and in that stillness, I had lost him. I told myself he would return, that maybe this was a pause, not an end. But as a week passed, then too, hope gave way to grief. Not the loud kind, but a slow-burning ache. I missed his questions, his gaze, the feeling that someone in this world had chosen me, not out of obligation, but out of a quiet, fierce kind of care. One evening, unable to take the silence any longer, I went to the market just to feel the buzz of life. As I walked past the old bookstore near the corner, something familiar caught my eye. A blue scarf, frayed at the ends, the very one Rayyan used to wear on rainy days. It was draped around a young man seated outside, sketching people as they passed. My heart thudded. I stepped closer, unsure, afraid to believe. But when he looked up, I knew. Rayyan. He blinked, startled, then smiled softly, guarded, as if unsure of his place in my world now. "You found me," he said. "I never stopped looking," I replied, the lie sitting bitter on my tongue. "I just didn't know where to start." He closed his sketchbook, stood slowly. "I didn't leave to punish you," he said. "I left because staying and hoping was hurting more than leaving and healing." I was afraid, I admitted, of the line between right and wrong, of ruining something sacred. But I realized something in your absence. Love doesn't ask for perfect timing. It only asks for courage. Rayyan's eyes shimmered, and for the first time, he looked vulnerable. "And do you have courage now?" I stepped closer, closing the space that had haunted me for weeks. "I don't know, but I'm here. And I'm not letting you go again without showing you what your love awakened in me." A silence fell, this time not of tension but of understanding. He reached out, fingers brushing mine. No fanfare, no promises, just two people finding the courage to begin again. We didn't walk home that night. We walked toward something else entirely, a future unpromised perhaps, but not unloved. And in that quiet, faceless world, behind closed doors and unspoken names, we allowed love to bloom, not in grand declarations, but in the steady rhythm of two hearts finally choosing the same beat.